Welcome to a gloomy, dark night. This is the day before New Year's I'm recording this, so happy 2023. Well, that's when this video will come out. You will see this. This is done by request. If you want to request reaction videos or other kind of video subjects, you can go into my Discord. I have a video request section. You throw in the video and you tell me, I want to see a reaction. I want your feedback on this subject and so on and so on. So this is Linux versus Windows. Which is best for gaming laptops? It's from Jared's Tech. It's quite a big channel. It's 11 days old from when I record this video. So again, let's just dive into it and see what's going on. And
gaming on Linux has improved a lot, but should you use it on your laptop instead of Windows? To find out, Tuxedo Computers sent us their Stellaris 15 with Intel's Core i7-12700H CPU, Nvidia's RTX 3060 GPU, and a 1440p 240Hz screen.
It's actually really good spec. I'm going to pause a lot.
Actually the exact same chassis as the XMG Neo 15 or Electronics Mech 15 G3. So I already know that the hardware makes this an excellent gaming laptop. What makes Tuxedo different is that they sell their laptops with Tuxedo OS installed, a custom version of Ubuntu.
So yet another distribution that nobody asked for.
But you can pick from a number of different Ubuntu flavors when ordering. They can install Windows for you in a dual boot setup like I've got if you're not quite ready to go all in on Linux. This allows you to pick which operating system to use during boot, so best of both worlds. The laptop also has water cooling support, even in Linux. Apparently Tuxedo Computers reverse.
Wait. Okay, a laptop. What is your idea with a laptop? It's a portable computing device. Having this big brick beside it kind of takes all that away from it. Now you not alone do you have to put your laptop into your bag, you now have to have this brick in your bag. And if it's water cooling, how well does this transport? Like, how well are the hoses handling being unplugged and plugged in and transported all over the place and stuff like that? Not to talk about the reservoir and stuff like that. Or is this meant to be standing at your desk and then you unplug your laptop and then you take your laptop with you home? And then when you come back into work, you plug this into your laptop. I have a feeling that people that need water-cooled laptop will probably have a water-cooled desktop. And again, the market group for these people who need a... You get what I'm saying here.
Also has water cooling support, even in Linux. Apparently, Tuxedo Computers reverse engineered what the laptop and cooler were doing in Windows over Bluetooth, and then incorporated that in their own management software in Linux, which I think is super cool. This laptop...
It is cool, but that's all it is for me, it's cool. It's probably also heavily expensive. If I need water-cooled system, I will do it on my desktop, not my laptop.
Already has plenty of port. Another cool thing offered by Tuxedo is you can get a custom image printed on the lid. You can also laser etch the Windows key, aka
it's nice, but who gives a fuck?
A super key for Linux for extra customization. The laptop was able to last a bit longer when running on battery with Linux, but at just 2% longer compared to Windows. The difference is within the margin of error range.
So it's the same.
Alright, so the laptop itself is pretty cool, but what about gaming on Linux? Right now, the RTX 3060 GPU in this laptop is limited to 115 watts in Linux due to an Nvidia driver issue. So Linux isn't able to use Dynamic Boost just yet. By default in Windows, Dynamic Boost works perfectly fine. So the 3060 can...
Right there tells you Linux is not ready for gaming. And I know there is plenty of excuses why that is not. Oh, it's because it's proprietary code or proprietary software, and the excuses are coming and coming and coming and coming. The matter of the fact is, this is where Linux is with this laptop, with this driver. I don't care about excuses. I can't use them for anything. All your excuses will not make this laptop run, with the same wattage as it does on the Windows. Trying to fix it probably will. Go and talk to Nvidia or reverse engineer what needs to be done will. A little bit of a tangent here.
Run up to the maximum 140 watts, meaning we'd expect Windows to perform better in games compared to Linux, simply due to this GPU power limit difference. Fortunately, in Windows, the Control Center software for this laptop allows us to disable Dynamic Boost, meaning we can run the 3060 at the same 115 watts in Windows to match what it's doing in Linux for a fair comparison. So Nvidia's Dynamic Boost is is just a legitimate advantage that Windows has right now over Linux, at least until Nvidia fixes their drivers. We've tested games in
And I hope they will, and I pray they will if I had any deity I could pray to.
Windows both with and without dynamic boost, allowing us to fairly compare both Linux and Windows in the most apples-to-apples way with the same GPU power limit, and also the way things currently are with Windows being able to use more power, which will mean more FPS in games. We did most of the game testing with Steam. For games that won't run natively on Linux, you need to set the compatibility to Proton, which acts as a compatibility layer for Windows games to run on Linux. We also had some success using Lutris to run Epic or Ubisoft games with Wine. The ProtonDB and Lutris websites are great community resources to find out how well games will work on Linux. Definitely worth checking out. I'll leave links below. Overall, games performed better in Windows when compared to Linux.
What are they saying here?
Links below. Overall,
dynamic boost off on. You're getting a few more frames on 1440p, and you're getting a few more. You're actually getting almost 18 more frames on 1080p. So the more you become more graphic card bound, so the higher up the resolution you go, the more you're reliant on the graphic card. They kind of evens out a little bit. The more you're reliant on, the CPU, so when you're running a lower resolution. I could be mixing these two up. It's been a while since I've been looking into graphic cards, but the idea is the same. I think the higher resolution, you're using more and more graphic card power. The lower resolution, because you're maxing out you're maxing out the frames, it goes also be more CPU bound. Would this mean a difference when you're playing the game? Probably not. Well, maybe in 1080p, so if you're looking at the dynamic boost off and the dynamic boost off in Windows and Linux, you're getting over 10 frames more per second. You're probably noticing that. 1440p, if the stuttering is the same, the timing is the same, and the average min frame rates are the same, you will not noticing anything.
Games performed better in Windows when compared to Linux, even with dynamic boost off in Windows. In some cases.
So here, this is what I want to see. So the average frame rate, the higher that is, the better. But also what is really, really important is the 1% low. Because it drops all the way down to 30. I need to take this off here. And all the way down to 30 here. So this is how, so there's a massive fluctuation here. And and that can contribute to stuttering, jerkiness, and all that shit. What you want is this to be as close to each other as possible. So it's basically that Linux has a tendency in games, like I said before, it drops a lot of frame, it drops down way, way, way fast. Or way, way, way low, and then it drops up again. What you want is this to be as minimum space between them as possible to give you a more smoother and more consistent feeling gaming experience.
It was quite close, while 1440p in at least 2 games was...
And here again, we see it again here. If you played this game up here, Spider-Man, if you played this under Linux versus Windows, you will have a smoother experience under Windows, because the lowest frames don't go that low. Up here, it could almost be unplayable. So with 1440p, this game could almost be unplayable under Linux, because you are under 30 frames per second. And everything under 30 frames per second. At 24, you can kind of play it. Anything under that, it's like no go.
Unusable with Linux. I'm not sure why the performance was so much worse when it was doing okay at 1080p.
And you want the 1% lower to be higher than your set frame rate. Let's say you want 60 frames per second. Well, this here is massively playable. You will have no problem playing this with locked to 60 frames per second. 144? No. Not even under Windows. Set it to 60 frames per second, you can play it under Windows. Set it to 60 frames per second under Linux, you cannot play it. You will have a lot of issues here. That's what these things tells us. So let's say I set this to 60. Well, my 1% lower never goes under 60, so I will have a really, really smooth gaming experience.
CPU usage in Linux games was very low when compared with Windows, presumably related to the extra overhead involved with the translation layer. The results were much closer for games that have native Linux versions, but
Yeah, it makes sense. It don't have the interpretation layer, but I think it's a mix between the interpretation layer, just how much optimization they put into the game.
There aren't as many of them available. Control, which we ran through Lutris, was the outlier with far higher average FPS in Linux.
Yeah, but again, so this game here, Control, under 720p under Linux, would be playable if you were playing it at 30 frames per second, because it's just 0.8% or 0.8 frames over 30 frames per second. If you locked it to 60, you could go into the territory where you will get some fluctuation, too many fluctuation. You may get some screen tearing, you may get some stutterness, some jerkiness, some. If you're playing it in 7 or 1440p, you can play the game, and then the period of the game, I just went into puberty here, but period of the game would feel like, oh, it's playing really well. That's when you're over the 30 frames per second or 60, whatever you lock it to, you may be playing at 70 frames per second. It's like, yeah, this is really good. And then you go into a heavy action scene or something like that, and it's like, things stops, or you get like jerkiness when you're moving around for a split second or a couple of seconds, or the graphic may be popping in and out and doing weird things in the back end and stuff like that. That's because it goes under 30 frames per second, and the more under 30 it gets, the worse the experience will be.
But the dips in performance, as measured by the 1% lows, were much lower, and the game had noticeable stuttering when playing. Tuxedo OS seems to be based around Ubuntu to give customers maximum stability. However, it is possible that a more bleeding-edge Linux distribution might have better support and
it could be a possibility.
Performance for gaming. It's great to see gaming become more accessible on Linux. But with all the challenges that we encountered, including inconsistent performance, I don't think that most people should make the jump over from Windows just yet. Although we were able to get most games working with Proton, some games like Apex Legends just had way more hoops to jump through. By default, after installing it through Steam and attempting to run it, it would just sit there for over an hour trying to process shaders. And by the time it got to the end, it would just crash. So we went through that process 3 or 4 times. A huge waste of time. After searching for the problem, we found that it's possible to download a shader cache for the game that's ready to go, which did speed up this process dramatically, but the game still crashed. Fortunately, enabling the Proton log showed us that there was a simple permissions issue that we were able to fix. But that wasn't the end of it. We could now load the game, but then we started getting anti-cheat errors. But that was easily fixed by installing Proton Easy Anti-Cheat Runtime. This is just a single one-game example of what you might experience when trying to get a game working on Linux.
This is not just a one-game experience. A lot of people are having these experiencing when they wanted to game under Linux. And again, this is why I don't recommend gamers to run Linux, and gamers don't run Linux. Because if Linux was the best platform for gaming, every gamer would be running it. You will see all your Twitch streamers running it because it's the best thing to run gaming on. But they are gamers, they are not tinkers. They want to game, they don't want to tinker. And you, again, a lot of you amazing people now go mention down in the comments section, say, well, this game runs better under Linux. This game runs better. And you are probably right. But that only matters for that game. What if you play a lot of other games?
This definitely was not the only problem we had. There's a reason we only compared 6 games. Sometimes it feels like the problems just keep coming one after the other. You fix one thing only to move on and find a brand new error that you have to troubleshoot. In the end, we really only got Apex to work thanks to that community-sourced cache file. Meanwhile, on Windows, I just run the game and it opens perfectly fine every time without a second thought. To be fair, that was also the case with a number of the games on Linux. But these sorts of random problems do come up and just sour the experience. Then of course there are other learning curves associated with Linux if you're coming over from Windows, like getting familiar with the command line. Even simple things like opening a text.
This is a little bit like, it's not that, in my humble opinion, the learning curve coming from Windows to Linux if you install KDE or even GNOME, it's almost not there anymore. And you almost never, if you're a casual user and not a gamer and not a programmer and stuff like that, you probably never need to use the terminal anymore. It's a relic from the past. So this, the learning curve thing, it depends on what kind of type of person you are, a user you are.
Text editor. My partner, who tested all of these games, isn't familiar with KDE, so she didn't know the GUI-based text editor was called Kate. Just simple things like that that you might take for granted in Windows, and then not have any idea how to do properly in Linux. Basically, Linux is just a bit less intuitive. Not everyone's gonna jump straight in for the first time and get into Vim. Although the GUI is obviously available, the real power comes from the command line. The GUI just isn't as well polished when compared to Windows, which I suppose is completely fair, given...
Well, it comes down to the notion that, or the thing that Linux people are really afraid of GUI tools. Because they for some reason think that if you make a GUI tool, this command line tool is going away. That's not the case, because what the GUI tools 9 out of 10 times are doing is it's actually just talking to the command line in the back end. Instead of you seeing a black screen with text on it, you see a button and some input forms and some checkboxes. But you cannot run the GUI tool without having the CLI tools available. So no matter how many GUI tools you make for Linux, the CLI tools will still be there, because what we do under Linux when we make GUI tools, we just talk to the CLI tools. When I'm clicking a button, upgrade, let's say Ubuntu, when I'm clicking the update or upgrade button, all it's doing is running the command that's called sudo apt update, sudo apt upgrade. It's running that command in the backend.
Windows probably has a huge budget for UX designers. Would I recommend that you put Linux on your gaming laptop? Honestly, no for most people, unless you really like tinkering, or otherwise you're after some other feature like better privacy. For me personally, I just want things to work out of the box and not spend any time messing around. That was a completely different story back in 2008 when I got my first laptop and put Linux on it. I still actually own that laptop. Let me know if you'd want to see a video on it. These days my time is just too valuable to spend any time on that sort of stuff. I used to work as a system administrator managing Linux servers for many years before I got into this YouTube channel. And look, I think Linux is perfect for that sort of environment. But as for Linux on the desktop, or laptop in this case, personally, I don't think it's there just yet. Again, you can absolutely install it and get some games running. For me personally, it's just difficult to justify it when I could use Windows. But hey,
it's something when you talk to young people that don't have families, full-time jobs, or they are starting to take a education for a job, meaning they have more time that adults have. They don't mind waking up or coming home and spending 30 minutes to get asked to work again, or tinkering to get this game to work. Most people, that 30 minutes or an hour a day, that's all they have. That's all they have. Then work takes over, family takes over, obligations takes over, and so on and so on. So if they have to spend 50 or 60 or even 40% of their time tinkering before they can do what they actually want to do, most people don't want to do that. They want to just either sit down and game, or sit down and consume, or sit down and do these things because they have limited amount of time.
Hey, I suppose that's one of the cool things about having a dual boot laptop. If there are tasks that I need Linux for, then I can boot into Linux. And then if I want a game, I could boot into Windows. Obviously, these aren't issues that are specific to Tuxedo in any way. Again, overall, I found this to be a great laptop. I'm just speaking about my experience with Linux. A lightweight operating system like Linux might make more sense on less powerful hardware. Find out how well the cheapest possible gaming laptop I could buy performs in games next.
Awesome video, and I will say his experience is my experience. He has the same experience that I have with Linux, and I ran Linux on the desktop from late 90s to 2008 non-stop. If there is a Linux distribution on DistroWatch, I have installed all of those at one point in my life. Either just to install and delete them again, but I probably installed 98% of every fucking Linux distribution on DistroWatch over my years. But it has always come down to this, that Windows is just more nice. Meaning not that it's nicer to look at, but it just works. And most people, they want stuff that just works. And I will agree with him 1000% that Linux is great for servers, development stations, and stuff like that. Desktop, I think we are too late. I honestly think we are too late. Because this here is expanding so much. See you later, have fun.